than people living without the condition. And there has been tremendous advances in recent years in the tools and technologies that can be used to support better diabetes management, from continuous glucose monitors that let you know on an ongoing basis what your blood glucose levels are, to automated insulin delivery systems, apps to support healthier lifestyles, etc. So diabetes is a prime example of how the use of digital solutions can help not only the person living with diabetes better manage their condition and get better quality of life and health outcomes, but also how it can support the resilience of healthcare systems. So in this context, this webinar will explore the role of digital health technologies for people living with diabetes and primary healthcare systems, the frameworks that are required to support the introduction of innovative technologies and diabetes digital health solutions, and what a more holistic approach to evidence generation could look like from the viewpoint of various stakeholders, payers, people living with diabetes, SMEs, etc. So in this webinar, we will first hear a keynote lecture on how to be successful in promoting acceptance and uptake of digital health technologies before moving on to a panel discussion and then a series of questions and answers. So please feel free to ask your questions in the chat during the webinar, and we will seek to answer them at the end. And at the end, you will also have the opportunity to raise your hand if you want. So I'm Sabine Dupont. I'm the Policy and Strategy Director of the International Diabetes Federation Europe, which is a network of 72 national diabetes associations in 45 countries in Europe. And it is my pleasure to now introduce our keynote speaker and panelist today. So the keynote lecture will be given by Professor Dr. Freimut Schliess, who is a life sciences expert and an executive with many years of experience in industry, health insurance, and academia. And throughout his career, he has worked with many pharmaceutical and medtech companies to further the development of medications and digital solutions for people living with diabetes. He is also the co-initiator of the public-private partnership EIT Health, as well as the author of more than 90 publications, peer-reviewed publications, and an evaluator of innovation proposal, a juror at certain startup competitions, and reviewers for funding agencies and journals. So in his current role, Freimut advises healthcare companies on
there are three ways to keep people stuck.
topics, clinical trials, reimbursement, etc.
Get them focused on things they can't control. That's number one. And look at the news.
I think it would be great if everybody could mute themselves, or Annette, if you can mute everybody, that would be useful. And we'll be joining Freimut on the panel, Grant Reilly. So Grant is the head of communications and marketing for the Digital Health and Care Innovation Centre located in Glasgow in Scotland. And Grant has been living with type 1 diabetes for many years and is a very keen user of digital health solutions to help better manage his diabetes. We will also be hearing from Dr. Leonie Schaewitz. Leonie is an innovation manager at GWQ ServicePlus, which is an association of small and medium-sized health insurance companies representing more than 24 million insured people in Germany. And she has published many journals and has lectured on a number of topics, including IT security and human technology interaction. Dr. Malte Jacobsen is a resident physician specializing in cardiology at RWTH University Hospital in Aachen, and he previously served as a resident in neurology. He has actually quite a broad range of expertise across different medical fields, from cardiology, oncology, and diabetology. And last but not least, Sandro Girolami. Sandro is an expert in business planning, medical devices, mobile applications, digital health applications, and just to name a few. And he's also the co-founder of METEDA. And METEDA is an SME that develops software and hardware applications for diabetes and nutrition. So as you can see, a very esteemed panel indeed. So without further ado, I will leave the floor to Freimut, who will give a lecture, and then we will reconvene in about 20 minutes' time with the panel to explore the themes I've just discussed. So Freimut, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Sabine, for your kind introduction. Welcome to everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. And let me just start with my final statement about evidence-based market success in digital health. Yes, it's more than just about clinical trials. Each generation of evidence, each evaluation of evidence has to take place in the context of the recent public health challenges. And one of them is the demographic transition, meaning that we are facing a kind of reversal of the aging pyramid. That means that the percentage of elderly people or even very old people is increasing and the percentage of younger people is decreasing, with lots of implications on the social medicine and also the social with societies. One thing which is associated with this aging societies is, of course, an increasing disease burden, especially non-communicable diseases. This is because there is some bidirectional relationship between the universal aging traits, which are associated with biological aging, which I personally would not consider being a disease. But there's a connection with age-related diseases, and there's also a bidirectional connection between frailty and disability and multimorbidity associated with diabetes, neurodegenerative diseases, and pulmonary diseases, and so on. And to make matters even worse, we are facing another public health challenge, and this is the shortage of skilled workers in the future. And this is a projection done by the PwC in the study about Germany, which projects that we will have in 2035 1.8 million vacancies in the healthcare sector. And there may be the situation that around 35% cannot be filled. And there are several reasons which have to do with social recognition of care jobs, with physical and also psychological strains healthcare workers experience, and so on. So the big problem we have to consider when talking about evidence of digital health technologies. Yes, and another very well-known problem is the gap between the efficacy of treatments we see in clinical trials, in well-controlled clinical trials, and the effectiveness we observe in real world. And I show this here on the example of diabetes, where we see in clinical trials better outcomes in terms of glycemic control, in terms of HbA1c, as compared to real world situations. And this gap has to do with multiple so-called treatment effect modifiers, which are active under real world conditions and which limit the external validity of randomized controlled clinical trials. And this has to do something with a physician's situation, lack of time, reactive care in spite of proactive care. They are following more generalizing guidelines instead of personalizing guidelines. There is some degree of course also with the patients, which have partly a low health literacy. There's frailty and comorbid conditions and also polypharmacy treatment, which is not considered in the approval clinical trials. And also the system accounts for some degree of this treatment effect modifiers. We see the fragmentation of healthcare. We have fee-for-service payment schedules, and always missing disease registry, at least in Germany. This is there's lots of underdevelopment in this area. Yeah, and how we can manage this closing to close the gap. And I would say my approach I would like to propose here is closing the gap by closing the loop. And a good example is here with diabetes management, because diabetes is largely a data driven, not a data-driven disease, but diabetes management is largely data-driven already today. So it's a good example. And I would like to show you here the automated insulin delivery as a kind of technological way to close the loop. You see the glucose monitoring, which is continuous, and the continuously collected blood glucose profiles can inform and control algorithm, which can be part of an extra device or on the smartphone. And this algorithm is then controlling the infusion of insulin in the setting of an insulin pump therapy. And then blood glucose levels changed. This will again be monitored and so on. So you are closing the loop, and you are seeing an iterative cycling in order to improve in the best way the glucose control of a patient. And in a more general way, we see the connection between patient-generated data, an algorithm which of course can be powered by artificial intelligence, and based on this data and based on the action of the algorithm, an individualization of the therapy of patient, which leads to a change in the health status, which again is sensed by the patient data generating tools, and so on. And this technological closing the loop is also can be more generalized when considering the ADA and EASD recommendations for the management of hyperglycemia. Also, these recommendations follow the approach of iterative treatment cycles with stepwise improvements and stepwise personalization. And in this case, the goals of care go beyond the blood glucose control optimization. It's here the goal to prevent diabetes complications and also to optimize the quality of life. Now, this kind of thinking, meaning closing the loop, using treatment cycles, originates in a proposal from a panel of diabetologists around Antonio Ciriello, which was published in 2012 and which has meanwhile been validated by clinical trials, and which has further advanced as part of an EU-funded ERT Health project, the IPDM Go project. IPDM means Integrated Personalized Diabetes Management. And this is a nice example showing how digital health technologies can improve this iterative approach to maximum personalization. So in diabetes, everything depends on monitoring of your blood glucose concentration. And the old school way to do this is, of course, the self-managed blood glucose control, the finger pricking and so on. And today we have excellent tools like continuous glucose monitoring, flash glucose monitoring. Maybe in the future also non-invasive continuous glucose monitoring as a guide for therapy. We use smart pens for the administration of insulin, intelligent insulin pumps, and medication apps. And I would propose that this kind of information needs to be expanded by information which is not primarily related to blood glucose levels. So we need additional information in the future related to digital signatures of metabolism, lifestyle habits, biological aging maybe, but also the cognitive and the physical reserves of patients. It's important information in order to manage the therapy and particularly the treatment effect modifiers. Then this data should be analyzed. And also here we need digital tools, ideally a kind of AI-powered prognosis of disease causes based on this data. and of course the prediction of comorbid conditions and also of individual treatment outcomes. And this data is important for the joint decision making about adoption of personalized treatment strategies. Joint decision making means it's not the AI or the digital tool which makes the decision. It's joint decision making between the patient and the diabetes team, in this case, taking care of the patient. Yes, and then of course we need a similar set of data to assess the outcome of this treatment adjustment. And we also need to complement this pharmacological and non-pharmacological treatment by education and training measures, which also can be digitally supported in order to improve the health and disease literacy of patients by using individualized trainings. And the sequential repeat of this repeating this cycles leads to ideally to an improvement of the outcomes and to a maximum personalization of diabetes management. So closing the loop is, as I mentioned, about outcomes, about personalization, but also about pricing. And I would like to summarize in a little bit more generalized way that the action mode of this digital therapeutics, different from pharmaceutical interventions, the action mode is based on real-world data-based iterative feedback cycles, as we have seen in the diabetes management, which means adaptive learning leading to maximum personalization of individual care. So this is an interaction between the digital tools, digital therapeutics, with other ways to manage diabetes, of course, with the pharmaceutical treatment, but also with lifestyle adjustments and so on. So the goal is to really achieve a maximum personalization with a minimum of challenge of the patient. And this data can also revolutionize the assessment of performance and also the remuneration of healthcare services. So the continuous digital collection of data on structure, process, and outcomes quality, as well as patient-reported outcome measures, patient-reported experience measures, gives a good picture about the quality of each individual treatment, of each facility, of each hospital, and so on. And this database, which is generated in this way, can be used to inform also outcomes-based compensation components. The keywords here are value-based healthcare and also precision reimbursement. So moving a little bit away from diabetes, I would like to refer to a study conducted by McKinsey together with the Federal Association of Managed Care in Germany, indicating that there is a huge potential of savings through digitalization in Germany. So the study models an amount of 42 billion euros per year. And they analyze which kind of digitalization contributes to this. And for me, it indicates that it's not about only distributing some nice digital health applications to patients for the self-treatment. It's about digitalization of the entire ecosystem, the entire healthcare provision system, which leads to leveraging this huge amount of savings, including the enabler technologies like the electronic patient file, which we are going to implement in Germany at the moment, the e-prescription, but also making appointments between the healthcare provider and the patient in a digital way has a lot of savings potential, or a better communication between the care workers and so on. So it's shown that different areas of digitalization make different contributions, summing up to this huge amount. And the patient self-treatment, which we have discussed some minutes before, makes around 10%, but which is not a little amount. But as I would like to say, it needs to be integrated into the entire picture. And the key message I would like to make here, the key point is that leveraging the potential of digitalization is a multi-stakeholder effort coupled with a broad approach to evidence generation. Okay, so what for do we need evidence, and from where do we get this evidence? I think we all agree that evidence for the benefit for patients is essential, and this can be achieved very early on by co-creation with patients, joint needs identification, ideation and use cases, usability studies, but also by observing and collaborating with the do-it-yourself initiatives, which we observe in the diabetes scene. So tech-savvy people with diabetes, mainly young people, are constructing and building their own artificial pancreas system. And as clinical trials show, it does work. There are some liability issues, of course, but basically it works. And these people can provide lots of insights to the companies who in a very professional ways are developing such artificial pancreas systems. But also clinical studies, in case they collect patient-oriented outcomes and experiences or quality of life endpoints, provide evidence for patient benefit, of course. Beyond this, we need information about the medical efficacy, including safety and tolerability. That's clear. And this is provided by traditional laboratory and proof of concept studies, early phase clinical trials using narrow inclusion criteria. But beyond this, we also need real-world effectiveness stratification according to patient subgroups and treatment modalities. We need also evidence for this. And this can be provided, of course, by the large late-phase clinical trials, but also by more advanced so-called remote decentralized clinical trials, which are also called virtual or hybrid clinical trials. And of course, via the analysis of real-world treatment data from register studies, from the secondary use of health data, which is planned in the near future in the framework of a German research data center hosted by the BfArM, and at the European level by building the European health data space. Another important point is, what do health insurance companies consider as evident, as proven evidence? And here it's important to really start early to collaborate with payers, but also healthcare providers in order to get an idea what's important for them. Of course, health insurers are looking to the benefits for the so-called solidarity community of the insured, the people who are paying the fees, but also what is the impact on budget allocation for payers? That's also sometimes an important point because it's essential for them to get higher amounts of budget allocated from the state, from the contributions of insured persons. Another point is that your solution should help to integrate and improve so-called patient journeys. So it should close gaps between different phases of treatments. It should eliminate sectoral silos and so on. So this kind of benefit is important for the health insurance companies, but of course also the health-related quality of life of the insured person, which are the customers of health insurance companies, and customer satisfaction is an important criterion for these organizations, of course. Yes, healthcare provider would like to see workflow compatibility. It should not cause more work, but rather less work. And of course, also the appropriate remuneration for additional work is an important point in order to get acceptance there. And they would like to see more resources for personal interaction with the patients who particularly need this. And last but not least, there is an increasing trend to evidence for to also require evidence for sustainability, which can be obtained by the qualification of manufacturers, for example, for participation in sustainability initiatives, which are scheduled by insurers and healthcare providers. Sustainability means also solving cross-indication issues like polypharmacy, frailty and disability, but also cognitive impairment, which is common to many diseases and many polypharmaceutical treatments. And last but not least, how to support the UN Sustainable Development Goals could also be a criterion for demonstrating certain effort in this area. Okay, now I would like to briefly discuss with you some types of clinical studies or studies which can be done, which need to be done in order to provide this evidence. I would come back a little bit to diabetes and use the non-invasive continuous glucose monitoring, which is a monitoring which does not need any invasive or implantation of a sensor, for example, by a wristband. So how this can be established to inform diabetes management. And I think the first thing is you need to do proof of concept clinical trials in case you would like to use this data to guide the pharmaceutical treatment of diabetes patients. And the key objective of this kind of clinical trials, which usually have to be done in a secure clinical research facility, is to address the measurement performance in terms of accuracy, precision, and trueness. And this needs to be done in the areas of hypoglycemia, euglycemia, and hyperglycemia. So this is quite challenging for the manufacturers of sensors. It's a different case in case you use this sensor in healthy people who do sports or would like to have some control of their some information about their blood glucose level, or if you use this kind of sensors with patients who need this data to adjust their insulin therapy, for example. And this is because it's also important to model the impact of measurement inaccuracies in the different corridors of blood glucose concentration on therapeutic decision-making and patient safety. That means if your innovative device is measuring hyperglycemia, but in reality, the patient is hypoglycemic, then you would trigger a potentially deadly injection of insulin. So this kind of inaccuracy is totally unacceptable. And with the self-measured blood glucose measurements, we have the so-called Clark error grid analysis, which gives some advice which inaccuracies would be acceptable and which would be not. So this kind of trials is provides some basic information whether it makes sense to continue with the clinical development of a sensor system. The next step would then to address real-world effectiveness of such a non-invasive continuous glucose monitoring system. That would be a clinical study investigating the system in persons with diabetes under real-world conditions. And here you would address, for example, the impact on glycemic control in terms of HbA1c, time in range, time in tight range, time in hyperglycemic concentrations. But you would also address what's the impact on pharmacotherapy. Does the patient need less insulin than before? Is he or she more adherent to the use of medications, and so on. And you would also address the impact of remote non-invasive continuous glucose monitoring. Is the sensor appropriate to deliver this kind of data? What would be the impact of alarming and alerting thresholds on the effectiveness of telediabetological care, and so on. User experience is important. Collecting data for the implementation of value-based healthcare may be important. And last but not least, the collection of key performance indicators related to the healthcare structure, process, and outcomes. So here it's much more than about the quality of measurements. It's about how the device fits into the journey of diabetes patients, how it fits into innovative care modalities like the telediabetological care, but also how it fits into innovative reimbursement approaches. So the next is the traditional randomized controlled clinical trial, and there's lots of discussion whether this kind of quite expensive studies, of course, is feasible for digital devices, for digital health technology. And my answer would be, yes, it is feasible very often. And I love this example, which has been published some 4 years ago about the evaluation of an automated artificial intelligence-based decision support system in Nature Medicine. And this was paralleled by a publication of revised consort and spirit statements, which adapted these statements to the evaluation of devices which are integrating artificial intelligence. So the consort AI and the spirit AI statements, which are important to recognize for persons and organizations who would like to do clinical trials with this, integrating this tool. And I would like to briefly touch upon the most interesting findings here and design elements here. The authors were able to do a parallel control, to implement a parallel control in this clinical trials. So they have installed one intervention arm with patients using the artificial intelligence supported decision support system. This is the red line here. And this was paralleled by a control arm with patients using the same app, but this app receives information not from the artificial intelligence-based decision support, but rather from a team of physicians. And this is certainly one of the main measures to reduce bias in this kind of clinical trials. Another thing is that the patients also in the control group use a kind of app, the patient app, which looks like the active app, which has some different functionalities, of course, but it's important that there is a kind of placebo, because using an app alone, even if it's not active, has an impact on the metabolic quality. And another point which is important is the run-in period. You should equip patients already with the app or with a digital tool before randomization in order to neutralize for any effects just using this kind of app may have without the active principle. And last but not least, partial blinding to patients and physicians. This is certainly challenging in many studies with digital devices, but the authors were able to do this because the physicians who provided the advice were different from the physician team which treated the patients, and so they were able to establish a kind of partial blinding to patients and physicians in this randomized controlled clinical trial. Yes, a more recent trial design is remote decentralized clinical trials, which are also known as virtual or web-based or hybrid clinical trials. Here it's about doing as many assessments as possible in the participants' life settings at home, in everyday life. But this requires the presence and the availability of medical grade variables, which can be applied to collect integrated information on digital endpoints, usually with multi-sensor based acquisition systems which collect physiological and behavioral data. The advantage of this kind of trials is that they democratize the access to clinical trials. They are reaching population groups which would normally not participate in clinical studies. So you get a higher diversity and a greater relevance to the real world. That means a higher level of external validity of a study. And you can use study apps in order to provide all the information about the clinical trials and also in order to collect informed consent and so on. Yes, and this kind of trials can enable a massive recruitment of trial participants in a short time, which was exemplified some years ago with a so-called Apple Heart study, which exactly use this kind of clinical trial design. And last but not least, which is not a clinical trial design, but it's the future maybe, the European health data space, where data are collected from different sources, including the electronic health records, health data from apps, from digital health applications and other devices, but also data which are in health data registries available. And this data shall be used then primarily, of course, for the improvement of therapy, of the treatment of patients. So this data shall be used to individualized therapy, to get better diagnostics and improved healthcare efficiency. But there's also a secondary use of this data possible, and this is planned to make this data available to different stakeholders, including public research organizations, but also pharma and medtech industries, in order to do research, in order to design policies for healthcare provision, but also in order to develop more personalized and patient-centered treatments by drugs and medical devices. And of course, this kind of data can be used to develop real-world evidence from real-world data in a very precise and close-meshed and way, which opens new perspective on how to evaluate devices, how to contextualize treatments, and how to pay services in the healthcare system. Okay, let me start the brief discussion of the fast track process in Germany with a provocative question. Is this reimbursement without evidence? I would say no, but if you read some reports from health insurance companies, they are saying this. So what we are talking about, the German fast track was established in 2019 through the so-called Digital Healthcare Act in Germany. And this is the option to bring digital health applications to the market which are not yet fully validated in terms of clinical effectiveness. And this has lots of impact, opportunities, but also challenges for manufacturers, healthcare providers, people with chronic disease, but also the health insurance companies. The basic process is that the manufacturer applies at the Federal Institute for Drugs and Medical Devices, the BfArM, for getting listed in the so-called DiGA directory. In case the manufacturer can demonstrate that all the requirements in terms of safety, usability, data protection, information security, interoperability, and other criteria are met, and in addition, that the evidence of a positive healthcare effect is present in terms of medical benefit or patient-relevant structure and procedure improvements. In case this is available, you can be scheduled for final listing in the DiGA directory. You get immediately reimbursed and can start your pricing negotiations with the main association of statutory health insurance companies in Germany. In case you fulfill all the technical requirements, but don't yet have evidence of a positive healthcare effect, you should come up at least with a scientific evaluation concept, which should include a clinical investigation plan, based, of course, of some initial clinical data. And if the BfArM sees, yes, it's credible that the organization is able to do or complete a clinical trial within 1 year, then you get a provisional listing in the DiGA directory. You can be prescribed and the innovation can be reimbursed. But in parallel, the manufacturer has to complete his clinical trial, come up with a clinical study report, and in case the BfArM says, yes, now evidence is available, then you can shift from the provisional listing to the final listing and start your pricing negotiations. Yes, which kind of endpoints have to be demonstrated to to the BfArM, it should indicate a medical benefit. That means shortening the duration of a disease, prolongation of survival, which could also address more medium-term effects like improving the health status and improvement of the quality of life. But you could also go for patient-relevant structure and procedure improvements like better health literacy, patient sovereignty, easier access to care, and so on. Important is as soon as you go for class 1 or class 2A medical device, you can provide either medical benefits and or patient-relevant structure and procedure benefits improvements. But in case you go for a class 2B device, which is now possible, then you have in each case to come up with medical benefits. But I can say that most of the manufacturers who apply for listing in the directory come up with medical benefits in the primary endpoints and provide in the secondary endpoints also the other kind of benefits and improvements. Yes, in Germany, we have, coming back to diabetes, we have at the moment 5 digital health applications listed in the DiGA directory, which are targeting people with diabetes. One of them is permanently listed, which is the Hello Better Diabetes and Depression app. And the other 4 are listed provisionally. All of them address the quality of glycemic control and certain lifestyle habits. 2 of them collect continuous glucose monitoring data, the Una Health app and the Lucura diabetes therapy. But only one of them, the Lucura app, is using this data for an AI-powered analysis and for generating personalized therapeutic recommendations based on this AI-powered analysis in terms of adaptation and individualized nutritional therapy. Okay, a similar scheme has been recently implemented in France, the early support of digital medical devices, which is quite similar to the German one. There's a difference. You can apply with class 1 to 3 medical devices. So even high-risk devices can get a provisional reimbursement. And beyond going for therapeutic medical devices, you can also apply with remote medical monitoring activities, so with telemedical solutions. And the application process is similar. You are going here to apply for your CE marked digital technology, either for listing in the list, listing reimbursable telemedical solutions, or the other list, the LPPR listing medical devices for therapy. And then the ministry and the ANS and the CND-MTS, the Committee for the Evaluation of Digital Devices and Technology, if they find there is proven evidence about clinical benefit for patients and or organizational benefits for the healthcare system, and you fulfill some criteria on interoperability, data safety, and security, which is confirmed by the ANS, then you can start your submission of documents to the HAS. This is the health authority in France, who make the analysis and make the decision for a permanent reimbursement or not. And depending on the medical telemonitoring or the digital medical devices for therapeutic purposes, depending on this, you get a listing in the LATM list or the LPP list. In case you don't yet have this clinical benefit demonstrated, the Committee for Evaluating the Devices gives an opinion. So an opinion about the clinical benefits you could provide based on your provisional data, on initial data. And if this opinion is positive, you can get reimbursement for 1 year. And during this time, you have to prove the benefit in case you go for medical telemonitoring, you have 9 months to do so before submitting your documents to the HAS. In case you go for a medical device for treatment, you have 6 months, and then you need to apply for evaluation by HAS. In Belgium, we have the mHealth pyramid, which is a system providing 3 levels of evidence. So we have level 1, which only means that you have a CE certified medical device. We have level 2, which means that you have a device which can be interconnected, which is hosted by the eHealth platform, and where you have submitted a reimbursement request to the NIHDI, which is the National Institute for Health and Disability Insurance. Level 3 Light is corresponding to the provisional reimbursement in Germany and France. And the difference is here that Belgium gives you 3 years time to provide the evidence. And the level 3 plus would be the full and continued reimbursement, which to my knowledge has been achieved only by one app until today. This is a process, and another important difference to France and Germany is that not only manufacturers, but also sales companies, hospitals, scientific and professional associations can apply for reimbursement. And when it's similar, like in Germany and France, in case you have all the data, you get permanent reimbursement, that means level 3 plus. In case you are missing the level 3 requirements, still then you have the chance to fulfill these requirements during the next 3 years. And if you do so, you get full reimbursement at level 3 plus. So last but not least, I would briefly touch on the NICE evidence standards framework for digital health technologies, which is one of the most fine-grained framework of evidence standards I know. They define 3 risk tiers and 5 groups with a total of 21 evidence standards, starting with very simple devices which are not used for treating or managing patients, but rather used for improving the organization of healthcare, the tier A. Tier B would be about supporting patients in the management of a disease, and tier C would be really the hardcore treatment management. So devices which inform clinical management, which drive the clinical management, and which support diagnostics. So these are the most the higher risk devices. And in the UK, there is a close link between the risk-benefit ratio and the cost intensity and the required evidence and pricing. And in case you are tier C, which means the high-risk devices, then you have to provide evidence for effectiveness in the UK health and social care system. You can do randomized controlled clinical trials, or you should do if it's feasible, but also other kind of trials are accepted. In all tiers, A, B, and C, they would like to see real-world evidence for realizing claimed benefits in practice, which could be some statements from research or healthcare provider associations, for example, or from patients' communities, making it credible that it works under the specific real-world healthcare conditions in this system. And we would like to see a plan how you manage to measure performance over time. Different from Germany, you have to come up with a budget impact analysis indicating what's the impact of the usage of your device on healthcare costs. And if there is a high financial risk, you have even to come up with a cost effectiveness analysis. And different from Belgium, France, and Germany, there's no provisional phase to prove a positive healthcare effect while receiving already full reimbursement. Okay, I would like to sum up. Is it more than just about clinical trials, the evidence collection? Yes, it is. But real-world clinical trials are still considered the gold standard when it comes to proving evidence, especially in front of governmental authorities and scientific communities. At the same time, you need additional information for achieving reimbursement and a high uptake of digital health technologies in the market. You have to prove stakeholder involvement. You have to demonstrate that your device integrates into or even improves existing care pathways and platforms while reducing workloads. You have to demonstrate real-world benefits in terms of structure, process, and medical outcomes at the levels of national, sometimes even regional healthcare, keyword Italy. And you have to provide evidence for health and socioeconomic evidence. And the future, I would like here to join Hans-Georg Eichler from the European Medicines Agency. The future would be precision reimbursement based on the continuous collection of real-world data and the continuous derivation of real-world evidence for the performance of digital devices over time. And this will feed into a dynamic compensation agreement, which may include manufacturers, payers, healthcare providers, but also patients. And this is the future. Certainly lots to do in order to achieve this. I would like to stop here and thank you for your attention. And I'm looking forward to our discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Freimut, for this very comprehensive presentation of the opportunities, the constraints, and I suppose the different approaches to supporting innovation across Europe. So I'm sure we'll come back to many of these points, and I'll just like now to invite our panelists to comment on the points that you have raised, perhaps starting with Grant. From your perspective, Grant, as a person living with diabetes, what is your view of those, the opportunities of digital health technologies for the self-management of diabetes?
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Sabine and Freimut, for a fantastic presentation. As a patient, that is information that I do not often get to see, so it gives me a lot of trust in the devices that I use on a daily basis. As a type 1 diabetic with 30 years lived experience, up until 2017, I had probably done over 135,000 finger prick blood tests and taken over 63,000 injections in my lifetime. And then I was given a CGM and an insulin pump, which has been life-changing for me in terms of making my life far easier and improving the control of my diabetes. Before 2017, I used to go to a diabetic clinic once a year for 10 minutes, and my HbA1c was always within the good parameter. It was only once I got the CGM and I could look at the data from the CGM compared to the paper-based data that I kept in notebooks and jotters, I realised that my HbA1c was actually at a balanced average of highs and low spikes for my diabetes. So it really wasn't that great. But now on a digital screen, 24 hours a day, I can see a flat line of blood glucose control. I'm a massive believer in digital technology. I'm probably a proactive digital diabetic. And I think it's all about empowering citizens, empowering the patient, and giving them the confidence and enabling them to make informed decisions around their healthcare. I think as a patient, I want to be accountable for my health and I want to have ownership for my data. It's my data that will either way improve or cause a decline in my health. And if I take control for that, then I think that can only lead us to a better place. And in terms of technology in diabetes in the UK at the present, there's a lot of work being taken place in the field of diabetes and the access to technology. And it's very much people wish to have access to it. The health and care professionals want to give people access to it because they see the benefits, but it's the cost which is the restrictive measure. Now, I think we need to look at changing the narrative around digital technology in healthcare. It can no longer be seen as an expense. I think it has to be seen as an investment in people's health and care, because that investment now at this early stage or at an early stage in somebody's long-term medical condition will lead to reduced expenditure for health and care providers in the future. So thank you.
Yeah, no, that's great, and I think that many people recognize that digital health technologies can really help in improving empowerment as well, not just the health outcomes, but ensuring that people are in charge. But I wanted to ask you, perhaps, how far you want to take it. So, what do you think is critical? Because not all people living with diabetes have the same experience, confidence, and comfort, I suppose, with the use of digital health technologies. How comfortable would you yourself be with using like fully closed loop system where you have no interaction in effect, no management yourself? Well, you could always manage, but the machine pretty much does it by itself.
From my experience and in my personal opinion, I think there is two types of patients that have diabetes, and there is no right or wrong. Initially, everybody goes in the denial phase when you're told that you have diabetes, and you have to eventually learn to accept it, and you accept that it's going to be a change of lifestyle, and it's probably not as a negative change as it was 20 or 30 years ago. But if you are proactive and you are willing to see the bigger picture and see the benefit of using data to empower you, I think patients would see more significant benefits to their health and care. And the ones who are proactive, I think, would require less health and care treatment from professionals on a day-to-day basis, which would free up more capacity for those who did need more support. It's interesting to see when Freimut mentioned the decentralized clinical study that he sees in the future of a person-centered record, the linking of medical data with off-the-shelf consumer data. I did that 3 years ago as a pilot project. It's not medically approved, it's not tested by anybody. I did it myself, and it massively improved my health and care just by looking at the data from my exercise, nutrition, sleep, blood glucose, insulin pump. I took the time to look at that data, and it made a massive difference, because it's the grey area data that medical professionals don't get to see in a 10-minute appointment. It's the rest of the year data that has made the biggest difference for me.
Yeah, thanks, Grant. So perhaps, Malte, from the viewpoint of the healthcare professional, I mean, how do you relate to what Grant has said? And do you see that it is possible to see how people will relate, or what the key predictors of usage of digital health technologies will be amongst people living with diabetes and other chronic conditions?
Yeah, I think Grant just raised an excellent point. I mean, at the end, we will have to figure out how we can really correlate all digital tools data with the clinical data. I think this is where all the value comes from. Two important points, I think, so there will be no one-fits-all solution. So I think Grant is a patient who's really engaged with this disease, and he's really informed, and he knows how to, interpret data and stuff. So I think we need to figure out which patients are eligible for which digital tools. And this is actually something we're trying to implement in our clinical trials. So we try to figure out who has what level of digital health literacy, and what would be the best solution for the individual person. And I think this is also a point Freimut mentioned, that at the end it's about personalized medicine, so we need to really find that out in detail. The other point I think is very important is, you asked him about, would you be comfortable with a absolute closed loop system? And I think he would be fine with it, or at least I'm thinking it, if the data really shows in a real world environment that it is a safe and effective treatment. Yeah, I think if we once reach this point that we have digital health tools which show this effectiveness in a real world environment, most patients with chronic conditions would be favorable for using digital health tools to some extent.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I suppose, Sandro, you develop some of the tools that that people use. So, from your viewpoint, how do you approach this personalization and usefulness and perhaps different levels of comfort of users? But also from your perspective, I suppose that you relate to the insurers and the payers, and that you also have to promote acceptance from that stakeholder group.
Yes, for sure. I mean, a lot of work has been done to demonstrate how these tools are efficient and how are sustainable now. I think that all the work that was done before with congresses, EU projects, clinical trials, piloting solution was a good approach to bring the solution to the market. Then we have this changing area that I call the COVID period, in which all users, I mean, patients and healthcare professionals, start using digital tools in a way that before it was supposed not to be possible, because when we speak about type 2 diabetes, for example, no one was thinking that elderly could use a digital tool, a smartphone, and so on. But everything changed with this. So nowadays, we don't need to demonstrate the relevance, but how they could be sustainable. We have regulation now. We have a certified software medical device. So we certify the software as a physical device. Same approach, same test, everything is done. But we need to change the organization and adopt a new process designed for digital services. We cannot leave the challenge to, let's say, the wellness, the possibility of doctor and patient. We need to change the organization. We need to educate and train all the stakeholders around this, because the digital tools works, and we know that works fine. Next step is to, let's say, fine-tuning the solution, because what we created before COVID was just a piece of the market. Now we need to think of all the patients, not only the ones that we thought before was able to use digital tools, as for example, type 1 are most used to do this. But now we know that there are not only them that can use digital tools, everyone can use it. And we need to improve, we need to explain them and tell everyone, all the stakeholders, how to use it. And the digital tools we know are used for clinical decision support for the healthcare professional. We can deliver personalized diabetes management. We can empower the patient to better understand the needs and managing the tool. And also using not only, let's say, these digital tools, but also the data produced by digital tools with AI, for example, to optimize the resources, to do screening, population screening with a lot of less resources, to streamline clinical administrative activities, breaking down waiting lists. This is a cultural changing that we need to look at and to create a better world, a better healthcare system.
Yeah, I think you're being very optimistic, I think, in thinking that everybody uses it and all the rest. I'm not sure that this is always that obvious, but that's interesting. And from your viewpoint, I think, Leonie, because as a health insurer representative, you have to make an assessment and see how well things fit and how ready they are. So what is your experience of this post-COVID, perhaps?
Yeah, so actually, unfortunately, we see it quite often that digital health solution providers or startups, they come to us with a ready-made solution and a very concrete idea, and then we have to tell them that their solutions, their idea does not fit or is not compatible for the statutory health insurance framework. And that is frustrating, and because typically startups have invested a lot of time and effort in their ideas, and that's why we really think it's important and very sensible to enter into discussions with health insurance companies early on, and we also are really open for co-creation, not only with patients, of course, as well, but also with health solutions providers. And because we think that health insurances, they have insights into the market and also have data and really know the health deficits of their patients, and together that can build good solutions that fit.
So if you had to say, so what are the main criteria for you in terms of looking at an application? What is the most important?
Yes, so I think we have seen in Freimut's keynote that there is, well, actually there are two ways to access the reimbursement market in Germany. So we have the DiGA path, where there are very strict criteria that these are defined when you apply for the DiGA. But there's also another option in our systems, because in Germany, health insurance companies can conclude individual so-called selective contracts with healthcare providers, and there the health insurance companies can decide on their own what kind of criteria are important. And when we conclude such contracts, there are various criteria relevant, but I would say that the focus is always on the added value for the patient. So we, for example, ask questions like, does the solution solve a relevant care deficit? Does it improve the quality of the care? And in general, of course, health insurance companies are interested in optimizing care and saving costs. It is, of course, easier to conclude such a contract when clinical data is already available. So, for example, by randomized controlled trials, but this is not necessary. We also look at, so what's important to us, also these criteria of user experience and user acceptance, because I think we all know that even if a solution has shown clinical effectiveness, it might be not usable or used by patients. So these criteria are also important. And of course, as well, we look at data protection and IT security issues. Yeah. And I think, well, what we also do is that we review the effectiveness. So we do ongoing controlling. So for each of these contracts, we define specific goals we want to achieve, and then we look with the real world data that we see in the claims data that we have, whether we actually achieve those goals. So for example, we want to see a certain number of patients using the app, or we want to see, I don't know, maybe a shortening duration of illness time, etc. And yeah, so we check this. But of course, this kind of evaluation takes some time. So if you want to see effects in this, you need some time.
And how often do you review the effectiveness, for example, of the tools? Do you have the capacity to do this on an biannual basis? How does that work on your end?
Yes, it's ongoing, and I think it depends even what kind of tool or what kind of solution you look at. Yeah, but we do this ongoing. We also, in general, these supply analyses are very important to us. We have in the GWQ founded an own health data lab on this. So we have a team consisting of experts of data analyst, machine learning experts, but also healthcare experts, and they work together, and they try to identify, for example, misuse or overuse, or they try to assess the cost effectiveness and and quality of healthcare.
Yeah, no, I think that, you know, the analysis and I suppose the data that supports all of this is something that we keep on coming back to, and the evidence generation. I don't know, circling back to you, Freimut, what you think about the way that we look at that data behind the digital tools.
Mhm. Yes, I think it's a cultural thing mainly. So we will experience that next to drug therapies, the digital therapies will establish more and more in the future as integral compounds of chronic disease management. And for this digital therapeutics, the action mechanism is the acquisition and processing of individual patient data and the learning from this. And this puts data into the center of almost everything. So the therapeutic use of his or her individually generated health data primarily benefits the patient himself, herself, and raises the quality of therapy decision making shared together with the healthcare provider and the patient. And they will achieve by this way a new level of personalization. But at the same time, this very personal data can be used to optimize the evidence base for the treatment of many, many other patients. Can be used for the development of more effective medications and devices, and even to establish better health policies for more sustainable and resilient healthcare in the future. So the view of the value of one's own health data for oneself, but also for the general public, I think this represents a cultural change that we have not yet achieved. Of course, given the ownership of the data by the patient, we need to generate trust, but also offer incentives to patients willing to share their data for the common good. And in addition to the manufacturers, of course, the trusted healthcare providers are particularly called upon to provide information and awareness and to motivate and convince patients to go this step ahead and share their data with a big community.
So, Grant, what do you have any reflections on relation? Do you think that patients need incentives, and how do you see that the community thinks about the data? Because obviously, I think there are various perspectives on this, the risks, but also the benefits and the altruistic nature, I think, of the diabetes community.
Yeah, from my perspective, I will happily trade my data if it adds value to my life. And by that, I mean, the current situation in Scotland is I struggle to get life insurance. I struggle to get travel insurance because they ask me the question, do you have diabetes? Yes or no. They do not ask me, is your diabetes well controlled? Are you operating within set parameters? Now, if that could be incentivized, if I was incentivized to keep my health and care within a specific parameter that enabled me to access services or discounts or benefits, that would incentivize people to use it more. There obviously always will be risks with sharing data, but I think we have to remember the data is the citizens first and foremost. It should be them who decides what data they share and who they share it with. In Scotland in particular, for the organisation I work with, we have created, we are a demand-led business, so a health and care organisation will come to us with a particular challenge. We look to collaborate with industry, academia, health and care providers and citizens to co-design solutions that can be adopted, embedded and scaled within the health and care system for the benefit of everyone. We have a platform that's cloud-based infrastructure that allows the secure sharing of data. It meets GDPR compliances, it works, and we are now using that to kind of lift and shift for different health and care challenges within Scotland, which can then be adopted, scaled, exported to other countries. And we have a number of different long-term conditions that supports. But as more and more technology is used, we are seeing better ways to integrate it and expand what we can support.
Yeah, and I don't know, Malte or Sandro, whether you have also any views and experience of that.
Oh, well, I totally agree with Grant. I mean, the data belongs to patients, and the same time belongs to healthcare providers because they care, they change the iteration based on the data, and we need to educate again. Sorry to repeat this word. Educate people that use data. Let's say the second use of data is something that helps everyone to improve solution, to better care patient, and to better follow our way to work together. Because without data today, we cannot do a lot. We cannot change the system because or it takes a lot of time more than what we can do. We need to regulate it, but today we have a clear regulation under MDR that you need to use GDPR, you need to secure the data because you need to look at the cybersecurity. You need to do a lot of stuff. It's important that everyone use a medical device software, so certified as a medical device, that follow the rules and help everyone using the data in a very clear and transparent way.
And from my point of view, I think I really appreciate the initiatives Freimut also mentioned with the European Health Data Space. I think we need some trustful institutions who can take care of large amounts of data where really can, benefits for the patient can be achieved by analyzing such big data sets. I think so. One thing is that it goes beyond just mere data collection. I mean, at the end, if we just have data silos and we have all this data about, I don't know, diabetes or any other chronic condition, I think this is something we will not, really be able to make benefits for the patient. I think what we need is medical actionable information. Yeah. So we really need to focus on digital biomarkers we can extract from the amount of data to figure out how and when to help patients best. And I think one important point also may be that we also need to make the patients aware of where the borders of digital health applications are. Yeah, for example, that digital health applications can't be used in critical situations. Yeah, so I really think that we need to bring this all together and find digital biomarkers we can apply for as many patients as Sandro just mentioned, like potentially all patients with diabetes then one day.
I'm not an expert, but I also know that there are certain, you cannot get access to the same apps or the same digital tools depending on where you are in Europe, for example. Simply my iPhone will not download an app if I'm in the wrong country. So how do we ensure that, moving forward, we're not generating more geographical inequalities as well, potentially, as adding to the inequalities that currently exist in the countries because of different ways or different cultural approaches to the use of digital health technologies on the part of the people themselves, but also perhaps of the healthcare professionals. Anybody?
Well, the problem is in front of us, and we know that this is something that is happening. Primarily from a company working in this field, the problem is the post-market surveillance, is the way we are able to collect other systems to speak with us. I mean, when we have a digital tools for a patient, you need also the communication with the doctor. If you don't have this piece, then you cannot distribute in another country. If you have a simple or something that can be driven only to patient, then you can do it. But in any case, you need to follow what is happening in the field, because as again, it's a medical device and you need to do the post-market surveillance. So it's not an easy task. Also because the health management in Europe is different country by country, and we need to follow, even if they say more or less is the same, but it's not exactly the same. So then you need to follow the rules for the reimbursement. It's good that now we have DIGA, we have the Belgian stuff, we have Beacon, but we are still speaking about few activities, and it is very difficult to obtain. We just had this week the preliminary listed in DIGA after more than 2 years of fighting, more or less. And rules change very quickly. So it's a lot of work that needs to be done. And when there was a question before about startups cannot follow this path because it's costly. You need a lot of resources to do that. So we need to have a very clear requirements. We need to incentive the prescription of these tools. For example, we saw recently in US that with diabetes retinal screening, they are paying more with AI than without AI. It's a kind of challenging stuff that will change everything. And we need the interoperability between the system. Otherwise, as Malte said, I cannot follow 10 different software, try to understand which data is, which data are. But we need to have a common way to describe the data. We need to establish a semantic interoperability. We need to speak the same language when we speak about data. Only in this way, we can let the doctor follow in a very easy way patient using digital tools. Otherwise, we are overloading their work to follow the patient.
And maybe I can just briefly add to that. I think from a healthcare provider's perspective, I can tell you that no physician today will, integrate a digital health solution into his workflows if it will effectively will mean more work for him than it is, having the standard of care. So I think it is, as Sandro just said, I think it is very important that we need to have a common language, and we really need to show those benefits for all stakeholders involved.
Thank you, Malte. I think it's a nice conclusion, and we're coming to the end of the webinar, unfortunately, and I see that there is a question on the chat, so I may just read it. It's actually a comment and a question from Mariam Shokrala. So 2 points to bring to this discussion from HIMSS experience, working with hospitals and electronic medical records. The comment is, hospitals don't have any motive to mix patient-generated data from self-management DH tools and clinically generated data, even if you top them up with an AI tool or CDS. So this is mainly because they are still operating on volume-based and not value-based. So the risk is not held by hospitals. And secondly, they're very clear about the technical challenge to do that, mainly the cybersecurity risk of the integrated third-party tools, whether digital therapeutics or wearables, in addition to the variability of data quality and digital endpoints used in various self-management tools. So the question, it's a lot large, how do we find solutions to these? So, and we have 3 minutes to conclude, so whoever wants to go for that.
I mean, from a healthcare provider point of view, I can just fully agree, at least to the first point. I think for now, at least, it is impossible to integrate wearable data or any digital health tools data into the clinical information system. This is just not, it is just simply not feasible. But we have to find solutions to open our systems up for that. And I think a third-party institution like the European health data space might be a solution, so that we one day can really make use of this data also in clinical daily care.
Yes, I agree with this analysis, and the same issues you are confronted with when talking about constructing the European health data space, which is of course some kind of legal obligation, but you have to collect data from different sources. Manufacturers have to contribute their data, the clinics, the ambulatory healthcare units, and so on. And this is different in different countries, even in different regions. So there's a lot of effort at the moment. Although I'm quite optimistic that the European health data space will be the solution at the end, the path to get it is quite long for the reasons which were mentioned in this question. I fully agree with the analysis of this.
Thank you. And Grant, you raised your hand.
Yeah, from a Scottish perspective, we're using digital health and care technologies more in a prevention, early detection, and allowing patients to self-manage back in their local communities. So our focus is potentially less in the hospital environment at the moment, but more keeping people out of hospital for longer or getting them out of hospital quicker so they can recover in their own communities. And I think that is maybe a slightly different angle on it. We're looking at innovation in kind of 3 different ways of service, technical and business innovation to allow solutions to be adopted and scaled within our country.
Thank you. We have, yeah, go ahead, Sandro.
I have about the data management. I think they're essential when we speak about chronic disease. We cannot follow patients with chronic disease without looking at the data that they can collect at home. Otherwise, it's a never-ending story. The chronic disease population is increasing, the resources are lacking, and we are still thinking that we cannot mix the data. I think there is no way to win this fight. We need to work together to understand how to use each piece of data. The same that we did selecting the drug. We have different drugs with different possibilities. We will have different digital tools with different digital possibilities. And we need to use the right digital tools for the right person, the right patient.
Thank you. We have come to the end of the webinar. Unfortunately, I think that there's a lot of food for thought indeed, and I think that what it has shown is that we have actually achieved quite a lot. Still a lot to be done, but I think that we need to ensure indeed better collaboration, better alignment to make sure that those new technologies can be adopted for the benefit of everybody. So I wish to thank you all for attending this webinar, and of course a big thank you to the panelists and Freimut as the keynote speaker for your fabulous insights. So thanks a lot, and goodbye for now.
Goodbye. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you, everyone.